Hi everyone, and welcome to the Monomyth Diaries, a bi-monthly podcast where ordinary people get to share their hero's journey. I'm Mandi.
And I'm Karen, and we'll be your hosts. Each episode will feature a hero who will share their journey of growth.
We'll hear stories about forgiveness, survival, determination, and much more.
We're glad you're joining us because we all have a monomyth to share and someone out there needs to hear it. Welcome to the Monomyth Diaries. Today's featured hero is my co-host Mandi, who's going to share about her tumultuous journey towards embracing change. So tell us, what was the environment you were born into?
So I was born in a small town in Ohio. I had a mom who was super nurturing when I was little. She used to make cookies. She made all of our clothes. I remember her washing and drying my hair. I remember her reading us stories when we were very, very small and tucking us in. However, I did have a dad who drank a lot. And by my definition, I would say that he was an alcoholic. There was a lot of fighting between my parents. Sometimes they would fight so badly that my mom would throw all my dad's stuff out on the front porch for everybody to see. So my dad would sometimes live with us, sometimes he didn't live with us. We really never knew when he was coming and going. When I was in about third grade though, things got really, really bad. And my dad left and moved in with his mother, my grandma, and we became latchkey kids. So my mom was raising us and she went back to work. And then as I aged, at some point maybe when I was in middle school, my dad came back into the picture because I had gotten sick. And so he was spending a lot of time back at home. And somewhere in there, and I don't remember the exact timeline, my mom starts drinking. But at this point, my dad is back, but my dad is sober. And so my dad's not drinking, but he's what I would have called a dry drunk. He didn't drink, but he was still really, really angry all the time. And my mom's drinking got worse and worse and worse as I aged. And really by the time that I got into high school and college, my mom was what I would call a blackout drunk. And she would drink so much that she would just pass out. And she would forget me places. There would be no food in the house. We couldn't wake her up. It was really crazy. And at that time, my dad was working for the railroad, and so he was gone a lot. And so sometimes he would be gone for a week or so at a time. So really, I was just there kind of on my own. It was a super, super unstable, chaotic, unhealthy environment. I felt really abandoned by both of my parents. Because there was just never any stability. You just never knew what you were going to get with either one of my parents. So it's kind of crazy.
Wow. Well, building on that, how would you say the relationship between your mother and father shaped your perception on family dynamics?
Definitely my relationship or my parents' relationship, there was this sense of duality all the time, there was this idea that they loved each other, so they were going to stay together, even though there was so much turmoil, and that love coexisted with turmoil.
Right.
So I thought that was normal. There was constant conflict and instability. I didn't have any sense of security. I always had this fear of abandonment, and it really caused me to cling to relationships even when they were unhealthy. So.
Okay, wow. So, having come from this whole background, what would you say were some standout moments from your past that were turning points for you?
Oh gosh, turning points for me. I would say that one of the biggest turning points of my life was in high school. Everybody starts talking about college, right? What you're going to do after high school. And somewhere I decided that college was the answer to my problems. And all of the turmoil going on, I thought if I could just go to college and get a college education, then that's going to make my life better. So that was one. So I worked and worked and worked and worked and got straight A's in high school, and got myself into college because my parents couldn't afford to help me with that. I had to do it on my own. And so I paid for college all by myself.
That's awesome.
But the reality is that didn't fix my problem. I also thought that maybe having a relationship with boys would solve my problem. You know, the white knight, someone's going to come in and save me and take me out of this bad situation. And that's a repeated pattern for me. I had a lot of relationships, a lot of bad relationships where I was really hoping that someone would save me. Another turning point was I moved from Ohio to Texas. And once again, there was a boy that was part of that equation in there, but I thought a geographical solution, getting away from all of the crazy people in my life would be the solution, but really I just took all the crazy with me. So you're going to see this as a pattern for me. Yeah. I was always constantly looking for something outside of myself, an external solution to my problems. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned though you worked really hard to get to college, but it didn't fix your problem. But would you say that it was kind of part of your try-fail cycle, like you were kind of building muscles, like you know, it fixed one problem, it, you know, got you an education, and it also, would you say that gave you some confidence to take the next step?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, all of these like you said, trials and failures. I gained a lot of valuable experience from all of these experiences. Definitely, you know, getting an education definitely did help, and it definitely got me to Texas. So I can definitely go back and see this, you know, this situation led to this situation, which led to this situation. So it was all part of my past and part of my journey, in order for me to get to a place where eventually I'm going to realize that there's no external solution to my problems. Yeah, for sure.
Let me ask you this. Do you think if you were presented in that moment when you were thinking about going to college, and if you were told like, the real solution is an internal one, do you think you would have been strong enough to face it at that moment?
No. I think I needed to have enough bad situations and enough experience to finally figure out that an external solution isn't going to be the solution that I needed.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to have to come from within, right?
Totally.
No, I would not have been able to do that back then.
Okay, so going back to your home environment, how would you say it affected your sense of trust and security in others?
Wow. Yeah, so I grew up in so much chaos that I felt like chaos was just normal. I didn't like to be alone, and I didn't like quiet.
Right.
Because that was just never, I grew up in a house where there were 3 siblings plus 3 from my mom's first marriage. So sometimes there'd be 8 people living in this little bitty 1,100 square foot house, you know, so it was loud and chaotic all the time, you know, and also, you know, between my parents fighting, that just kind of felt normal all the time. And I carried that into my adulthood. And so I feel like times that were sort of peaceful, for example, like when my dad moved out and it was just us kids with my mom, there was some peace in the house.
Right.
But those times of peace caused me a lot of anxiety because I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like something bad was always going to happen. And it just, that chaos and that sense of insecurity and feeling unsafe all the time really was a giant role in shaping all of my relationships moving forward, with coworkers, with friends, with romantic relationships, because I constantly seemed to surround myself with unhealthy and unsafe people because that's all I knew. That was normal. So of course I attracted, you know, that whole phrase of what you know, where energy goes, or, you know, what is that phrase where energy, where you focus your energy, that's what grows, right? And so if I'm focusing on these unhealthy people, that's what I attracted.
Right.
And so I had all these unsafe people in my life. I had a sense of abandonment. I was so afraid of people leaving because that's what they did. You know, my dad left all the time. My brother left for college, you know, and he was such a rock when I was, you know, younger. My mom, even though she was present, really wasn't, because she was drinking so much and passing out. And so because I got this sense of this fear of abandonment, I would lose my voice. I would sacrifice myself, and I would compromise my own moral compass all the time to keep people from not leaving, if that makes sense. I would cross boundaries of what I thought were right and wrong just so that people wouldn't leave, that they would like me. And I also realized too, in all of this, that I couldn't really depend on people, because I picked unhealthy people to be part of my life. Let me give you an example. When I was in high school, I got pregnant. And I did eventually end up having an abortion. And I had this really, really good friend. She was supposed to be my best friend. And I confided in her that this was happening to me. And sadly, we're in high school. It is what it is. But at the time, she told somebody else, maybe a couple other people, I don't know. And when you're in a small town, that spread like wildfire, right? Everybody knew it. And what I realized was that I couldn't confide in anybody. I couldn't trust anybody. And it's heartbreaking. Fortunately, she and I were able to mend that relationship, and we're still the best of friends today. Because, she did apologize, and, and I was lucky enough to, forgive her and know that we were high school kids. We were all doing the best that we could. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
actually, that leads me to my next question. So you're talking about this sense of abandonment, and thank you for sharing the story about your friend in high school and getting over that major conflict. Can you share another particular instance where that sense of abandonment is going to impact your decision and your relationships?
So I had a tendency to stay in bad relationships. Like I said, I didn't want people to leave, and so I would stay in really, really bad and unhealthy relationships. Let me give you an example. Yeah. I started a little bit to share that I had gotten pregnant when I was in high school. I was dating this boy. Let's call him Joe. And I was so head over heels for him. When I first met him. He was just, tall and handsome and charming and funny, and paid attention to me. And I loved that, of course. And we had a really good relationship in the beginning, but somewhere in that relationship, he would get what I would have called overprotective. And he didn't like me talking to other boys, and he'd get really jealous of my other friends, and so I eventually stopped having friends, and my whole life revolved around him. And sometimes when we would fight, he would get abusive. I remember one time when we were driving along in the car and we were fighting, and again, I thought that was normal. That's what people did. That's all I saw. He put his hand on the side of my head and smashed my head into the passenger side window.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, and that was a common occurrence, those kinds of events where we would fight and he would get physically aggressive. Yeah. And I stayed in that relationship for years thinking that was normal because, one, I thought it was normal. That's what I saw happening between my parents. And I just was so afraid to be alone.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, coming from that and having had that kind of experience, what would you say was the catalyst that would begin your transformation? Because you're not in that kind of relationship anymore.
No, definitely I'm not. And I think that's the beautiful part of what we're doing here. Yeah. I get to tell this story of how different I am than I was when I was younger. If we fast forward from high school and past college into my 20s, I'm married at this point to my first husband.
Right.
And it was not a good relationship. We were married for about 4 years, and my mom passed away. And when I was going up there, because at this point I'm living in Texas, and I know she's dying because she had cancer. And my ex-husband literally told me right before I went up there that he didn't want to be married anymore. Which, wasn't a shock, but again, bad relationships and not wanting to be alone in that sense of abandonment. It was trying to handle that at the same time as my mom knowing she's sick, knowing she's going to die, and really wanting him to be present for that process. And so I got on a plane and I went to Ohio, and he stayed in Texas, and then he disappeared. I couldn't get a hold of him. I had no idea where he was. And it was just really bad, and then I go up and I'm thrown back into the chaos of my family of origin up in Ohio. There's a lot of drinking going on, there's no fighting or anything at this point, because my mom has passed away. So it's just my dad, and he's angry. Oh my gosh, my dad, he, was angry, and he'd drink, and then he'd be sad, and it was just kind of crazy. The whole situation was crazy. Right. And at this point, I had been working with this really, really lovely woman, Dianne, for years. And I admired her so much. She just always behaved with such grace and dignity. And she had this lovely relationship with her husband. They were so cute. They were just so cute. He would come into the classroom with us and help us, paint things or hang things on the wall or fix things. And they would go out to dinner together, and they were just super cute and so nice to each other. But again, she lived with a lot of grace and dignity. She always was calm and collected, and had a lot of wisdom to share with people. And so shortly after my mom died, I was sitting on the front porch of my childhood home, and she called, and I was telling her all these woes about what's going on with my dad drinking a lot, and my mom passing away, and my ex-husband misbehaving, and I didn't know where he was, and I'm just sobbing to her on the phone. And she says to me, Mandi, did you ever think that alcoholism is your problem? And of course my answer was no, I hardly drink. Why would that be my problem, right? And my ex-husband, I hadn't really seen him drink a whole lot. So I was like, I don't think that's his problem either. So then she went into her story a little bit with me. So she shared a very, very personal story and became very vulnerable with me. And I did get permission from her to share this. She had married a man, Grandpa Pete, and he was an alcoholic for probably the first 20, 30 years of their marriage. And it was really bad. So she shares this story about what her life was like when he was drinking and how much turmoil there was. And they were raising their kids like that, pretty much the way that I was raised. And that he had gotten into a program, a 12-step program called AA. And that she had gotten into a program, which we call the sister program, which is called Al-Anon. And Al-Anon, as she explained, was for people who were married to somebody whose drinking bothered them or had been raised in alcoholism. And so it's a program designed to help mitigate the effects of alcoholism. And so she was lovely, and she shared this whole story with me, and I hung up the phone and I thought, that's not my problem. Like, I just couldn't see it yet. Does that make sense? But at the time, it planted that seed, that, she has something that I want, but I just didn't think that was how I was going to get it yet, if that makes sense. So I would say was, for me, the catalyst that really sets me on my journey of realizing that all those times that I was looking for an external solution, that I'm going to learn that I have to do it from within. So that's.
Wow. That's incredible. So can you share a little bit about when you finally accepted that it was the effects of alcohol in your home environment that was the problem? What did you do next?
So if we fast forward from that point of that phone call between Dianne and I, 6 months later, so 6 months later, my ex-husband and I, who wasn't my ex-husband at the time, he and I decided that we're going to try to work things out. So for those next 6 months, life continues to get crazier and crazier and crazier. So I'm I'm trying to work out this relationship with a man who, you know, is just as sick as I am, really. And when I say sick, I just mean like I don't have the tools. I think chaos is normal. I think, you know, fighting is normal. I think all of this is normal. But I didn't want it anymore. Like I didn't want to feel like this anymore. You know, I just had reached my breaking point where I was like, God, this is awful. And he had disappeared again. I didn't know where he was. I could not, I mean, it had been a couple of days since I had talked to him. And so I called Dianne one night and I'm just crying. And I said, I will try anything. And she said, I will pick you up on Monday and let me teach you about Al-Anon. So that, I mean, that was the beginning of me realizing like it is going to be the effects of alcoholism that shaped me.
Right.
You know, that shaped all of my experiences, and that all of my decisions and everything I had been doing were decisions based. I was doing the best I could, right, with the tools that I had, but I didn't have very good tools. So,
well, that's all the time we have for today. Join us for our next episode on Monomyth Diaries, where we're going to cover that leg of her journey.
Thanks for joining us. Really looking forward to the next episode where you get to hear all about my journey with Al-Anon. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, hit like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to email us at monomythdiaries@gmail.com with your monomyth and keep the conversations going.
Until next time, heroes, let's journey together through stories.